SpaceX is one of the largest aerospace companies in the world, so they have a lot of competitors who want to beat them. But aside from competitors in the United States, they also have a competitor on the other side of the Atlantic, the European Space Agency, or ESA. One of ESA's trump cards to defeat SpaceX, specifically its Falcon 9, is the Ariane 6. Faced with an insurmountable amount of problems, ESA may have to negotiate with SpaceX in order to use its Falcon 9 for their missions. And now, Elon Musk reveals new contract with European Space Agency. SpaceX's rideshare makes it a lot easier to send satellites into space. The goal of SpaceX is to help people reach their goals. And recently, SpaceX just closed a new contract with the European Space Agency, or ESA. So, let's find out all the details in today's episode. Stay tuned.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of my channel,
where we bring you the most recent news about Elon Musk and his multi-billion-dollar companies, space news, and the latest science and technology. But before we begin, make sure you subscribe to our channel and click the bell icon so you don't miss any of our amazing videos. SpaceX began a smallsat rideshare program in 2019. This program is meant to help smaller satellite owners get into space more easily and more cheaply by letting them share the cost of regularly scheduled launches. Right now, a lot of smaller satellite operators save money on the cost of going to space by riding on a rocket that is already sending a primary payload into orbit. The operator of the primary payload pays most of the launch fee. The challenge is that the smaller company has to follow the larger one's schedule. If the operator of the main payload has to delay the launch for some reason, the smaller company has to delay its own launch as well. SpaceX will play and launches ahead of time for the smallsat rideshare program, which lets smaller satellite owners book seats on the rockets a long time in advance. The launch should still go ahead even if one or more of the companies back out. This way, there won't be any more delays that come up out of the blue. It's possible that one of the smaller satellite owners will have to delay its own launch. If that happens, SpaceX will even pay for the rebooking in full. It will cost at least $2.25 million to launch up to 150 kilograms of cargo, and it will cost at least $4.5 million to launch 300 kilograms or about 660 pounds. This is a lot less than a minimum $57 million a company would have to pay to book a SpaceX rocket all to itself. It takes years of hard work to make a satellite that costs millions of dollars. Every second you wait for it to launch is like that. The co-founder and CEO of In-Space Missions, Doug Little, has been in the space business for almost 30 years and knows that better than anyone else. He was also in charge of designing the first Galileo satellite demonstrator, which is Europe's top global navigation satellite system. In-Space Missions, based in Hampshire, was started almost 8 years ago with the goal of reducing the time it takes to get technology into orbit by a large amount. The business plans, builds and runs, custom tasks for customers. A launch by In-Space Missions used SpaceX's rideshare and the orbital-class reusable rocket Falcon 9. This was one of 88 small satellites or smallsats that were sent into orbit. Little would have had to pay $11.8 million to launch a big satellite in the past. It costs about $1 million now. Little said SpaceX has changed the price in a big way. It's not just the slots on the rocket that are cheap. They also go a few times a year. An empty space on the rocket for 200 kilograms costs $1 million. Which is crazy, not as good as it used to be. Little chose to work with small businesses or early-stage startups worth less than $20 million after having worked for the European Space Agency, the UK's Ministry of Defence, and a number of private companies. There are people with great business ideas who don't know how to get their stuff into space, he stated. Satellites give researchers a lot of information about climate change, but they're also used for many other things, like collecting information for credit card authorizations or even following animals. Little said that now that SpaceX's rockets can be used more than once, the sky's the limit for making space travel more available. We are in a world now where people can come out of university, set up a space company, and get something in space in a couple of years, he stated. That was just unheard of even 10 years ago. In fact, this company is already leading the way in new technologies that'll make the space race even more fair and long-lasting. More and more governments are putting in place rules to make space travel less harmful to the Earth. NASA says that the U.S. Department of Defense keeps an eye on more than 27,000 pieces of space junk in orbit. Little said you can't keep putting things into space. There's only physically so much space you can go into before you start banging into each other. In the past, each satellite that was released had a single job to do. Little's team, on the other hand, not only has multiple users on their satellite, but they also have created technology that'll let future satellites be changed from the ground up. The Wall Street Journal reported that SpaceX has agreed to launch up to 4 of Europe's most important tracking and security satellites into space. According to the report, the deal still needs to be approved by the European Commission, which is the executive arm of the European Union and all EU member states. The European Space Agency and SpaceX just recently signed a deal for 2 launches next year. The head of navigation for the agency, Javier Benedicto, told the Journal that each launch will carry 2 Galileo satellites. The deal says that the satellites must be sent into space from the US on SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket. Last month, European space officials said they would have to make more important decisions in the next few weeks about when to start flying Europe's most important space rockets again after a series of delays. Launching people and things into orbit and beyond would be much cheaper with SpaceX's Starship program. This would change the whole space industry. The reason this is important is that every day, companies like SpaceX and others try to make spaceflight more like flying. However, launch prices need to go down for that future to come true. Starship comes in handy here. Musk, the founder of SpaceX, has said that one day, launching a Starship could cost as little as $10 million. The Falcon 9 from the same company costs about $62 million and can't hold nearly as many people as Starship. What's fueling this up? SpaceX was making plans for the Starship's second flight attempt with its Super Heavy booster. They are now just waiting for permission from the FAA and the Fish and Wildlife Service. So where does it all fit in? As price tax Carissa Christensen says in a report, Starship could potentially enable new businesses and even new markets if SpaceX builds a fleet of rockets that can launch many times and be used again. It's possible for companies that want to make sensitive materials in space like medicines to make business plans now that the prices drop so much. Another thing that could make space travel easier for more people is the Starship. As Christensen says, the vehicle could make space travel available to more people who want to go instead of just the very wealthy. However, most people will probably still not be able to take those flights for a while. It's possible that constellations of satellites could be built much faster with this vehicle because it can take so many to orbit, and this would save time and money. Also, a Starship could lead to new science discoveries. Massive telescopes like the James Webb Space Telescope have been folded up these days so they can fit inside a rocket shield. They are then set up in space. This might not be needed with Starship though. Space telescopes might be able to get better designs and features thanks to the rocket's huge carrying ability. Although some satellites like SpaceX's Starlink may be able to fly to space on Starship, this is not currently the case. So it's going to take a while for space agencies and companies to figure out how Starship's capacity can be used. Christensen expands. Want to know what to watch next? As most recently, they decided to postpone the launch date of the Ariane 6 to 2024 due to problems related to the launch system. Thus, after nearly a decade of development with delays, up until now, the total cost that ESA has spent on Ariane 6 has reached $4.3 billion. This will no doubt affect the development of ESA's Galileo satellite system. This is a type of navigation and positioning satellite similar to the United States GPS. With high-precision navigation and positioning capabilities, it will contribute greatly to civil and military fields, ensuring security for the entire region. Additionally, it also has some encrypted programs for governments to use for special purposes. Therefore, this satellite system will play an extremely important role for ESA. If deployed successfully, the European Space Agency or ESA will have its system, avoiding dependence on other systems like the GPS. But as I mentioned before, the Ariane 6 is encountering many problems related to the launch system. After launching the Ariane 5, ESA's launch system located in Kourou, French Guiana will soon stop operating at the end of this year. An alternative solution for them is to launch satellites on Russian Soyuz rockets, but due to the impact of the Russia-Ukraine war, this option is also not possible. Many would say that the ESA still has another vehicle, the Vega C. However, compared to the aforementioned rockets, its payload is quite small. While each Galileo satellite has a massive up to 700 kilograms, that means each Vega C flight can only carry a maximum of 2 satellites. This vehicle even failed a mission at the end of last year and has just restarted on October 9th, so perhaps it's not quite ready to take on this important mission. Moreover, the Vega C was also launched at the launch site in Kourou, French Guiana, much like the Ariane 6, which will be retired soon. So for now, ESA has no ability to launch payloads into orbit. After failing to find an alternative to compensate for the Ariane 6's early entry into its twilight years, ESA had to set its sights on the US, a country with world-leading aerospace companies. There the EU was presented with 2 options, SpaceX's Falcon 9 and the United Launch Alliance's Vulcan. These 2 vehicles are believed to be capable of launching large satellites like Galileo. However, we all know the problems with Vulcan. Earlier this year, they had a problem with the rocket's upper stage, causing its launch schedule to be delayed until now. Along with that, this rocket uses Blue Origin's B4 engine, but the progress in producing this engine is unclear, leading to the launch of Vulcan still undetermined. Thus, this rocket will most likely not be launched this year. Therefore, ESA has only one option left, SpaceX's Falcon 9, and honestly, if the Falcon 9 had been chosen earlier, the Galileo satellite system would have been much larger than what it is today. Currently, the Galileo satellite system has only 28 units in orbit. This number was launched by 11 missions spanning 10 years with 2 vehicles, the Soyuz and the Ariane 5, each launching only 2 or 4 satellites. With the Falcon 9, it can carry up to 5.5 tons of payload on GTO, if reused, and more if expended. That means it can carry up to 7 satellites or more. Most importantly, Falcon 9 launches more than any other vehicle in the world today, so it can help the system expand quickly. To date, the Falcon 9 has launched more than 260 times, especially in 2022, and this year, the number of its launches has reached 60, an unprecedented record in the aerospace industry. Thanks to that, the Falcon 9 has become the safest, most stable, and most reliable launch vehicle today. The best evidence to prove the effectiveness of the Falcon is their Starlink satellite system. The first launched back in 2019, after 4 years, this system now has more than 5,000 satellites. In terms of launch costs, the cost of each Falcon 9 is only about $67 million, which is much cheaper than the estimated cost for the Ariane 6 of up to $77 to $126 million, or the previous cost of the Ariane 5 of about $158 to $210 million. Besides the Falcon 9, SpaceX also has the Falcon Heavy. Although it launches less than the Falcon 9, it can launch a payload of up to 26.7 tons to GTO. The Falcon Heavy's reliability has also been proven many times in the past. It even participated in an important NASA mission, launching the Psyche spacecraft on October 13th. This is also a good solution for ESA, and it's certainly better than what the Ariane 6 can do. You know, it's quite a shame that ESA has once again given us a typical example of its weakness. The Ariane 6 was created with the ambition of competing, even beating the Falcon 9 and SpaceX, but after nearly a decade of development, what it's brought to the table have been delays and a huge wasted investment. Let's not forget that besides the Galileo mission, the Ariane 6 would have also participated in launching Amazon's Kuiper satellite constellation. But with its current capabilities, we're not expecting the 6 to perform any tasks anytime soon. ESA is much like a swordsman, been sharpening that sword for nearly 10 years to fight that opponent, and now he has to throw the sword into the ditch. What's worse, he's got to borrow his opponent's sword. Pretty embarrassing, right? But what are you going to do when you have no other choice, right? Perhaps after this debacle, they'll realize that beating SpaceX is nigh on impossible. Although we haven't heard anything about SpaceX accepting the request from ESA, you can bet money that SpaceX will make sure they are fully capable. More than ever, we can see the role and influence of SpaceX on the aerospace industry. Victory has been decided and it is spent for the most deserving entity. SpaceX will need a lot of Starships flying quickly in order to cut costs, but it's not clear how quickly the company will be able to expand its Starship operations. Once a rocket has completed its initial successful flight, it usually takes years for it to work the way it was meant to. NASA's already one of SpaceX's customers for Starship, though. In order to send people to the moon's surface as soon as 2025, the U.S. Space Agency is counting on a modified version of the vehicle to work as a lunar rover. Well, if you like this video, make sure to give a thumbs up and subscribe. See you in the next video. Thanks for watching.